Thank you very much for your kind introduction and also for the invitation, Andrea. Apologize again for not being able to be there today. As you mentioned, I just returned tonight from Libya, from mission to Libya and Tunisia. And I took advantage of today's opportunity of sharing just to give you a glimpse, presentation of what does it mean on the practical point of view and the public point of view, dealing with the public aspect of migration or refugees movement today in our region, my region where I'm working, the European region, but also around the world. Because as you mentioned in the opening, we are not talking about situations which are limited to a single country, or a single country can offer solution to those situations. We're talking about a situation which is involving the entire world, and this is a situation which is going to stay with us for a long time. So better that we have a plan, better that we know how to deal with for the sake of protecting the most vulnerable, but also our people at home that are actually receiving refugees and migrants. I would like to start my presentation just asking you kindly to read by yourself a few slides, and this just to give you an idea of the political, public health, and humanitarian pressure that this topic is handling, and not always for everybody clear and understand. So, apologize and sorry for maybe a bit cruel imaging, but that's the reality. This is the tip of the iceberg of the issue related to migration we have to do today. And this, in many cases, is a major emergency, but also a shared responsibility of government and international organization and the society as a whole. As I mentioned before, my area of work is mainly geographically based in the European region, that for us is a quite large territory, 53 countries. You can see here in the map in front of you. And as many other regions, we are tending to confront with a very diversified situation. In the box in red down here, basically what you have seen in the previous slides, a continuous flow of refugees and migrants moving from countries in a very unstable and very poor conditions towards a better situation. The green box is what traditionally in our region is the area of arrival for refugees and migrants because of the very attractive welfare conditions. This is very common to what's going on with Canada nowadays, in fact. There is a very little talking about the yellow box. Usually those are the country of transit, where we have discovered a new phenomenon, basically stranded refugees and migrants, that because of the normative in place in those countries, they tend to get stuck while crossing the countries. This is the case also of Northern Africa. The first image I show you is basically one detention center in Libya where people can station also up to 1 year and a half hoping then to move forward towards their own destination. In terms of issue, if we look at this from the public health perspective, we cannot postpone anymore, we cannot delay anymore to engage actively into addressing the public health implication of migration. This is not only because of the size of population involved. You have heard it before, numbers from Andrea, but this is also the share in our region, where now we are confronted with portion of 10%, 9%, 15% of the resident population represented by migrants, refugees, or asylum seekers. So this requires a very pragmatic attitude by the government and the system in place in order to be able to address the specificity and the multisectoriality and complexity of this issue. When we are discussing about refugee, of course our media, and I'm talking about our because the same is in Europe and I guess the same in Canada, they're giving a lot of attention to the number of refugees we are hosting at home nowadays. When we are addressing the issue of shared responsibility, we need to consider that yes, what we are doing in the Western countries is important, but then if we're going to analyze in detail the situation, and we're going to look where are the main center of reception, which are the countries receiving the highest number of refugees, usually are neighboring countries to area of instability, for a very simple human fact that refugees tend to hope to go back home quite soon if it's possible. So as you can see, most of the burden is shared among 8-10 countries, which are not actually one of them an economy, a flourishing economy. You can see here in the slides in bold black. Let's look at the Syrian situation because a lot of attention has been given to that. And as a consequence, all the public health concern and fear associated to this issue. What we have done with my team, just to analyze numbers in a very simple way, where we assessed what was the number of people living in the country before the crisis. Then what happened when the crisis started, from the number we can see that the majority of people are still internally displaced in the country. There is a very big number in Turkey, about 3.4 million, but this portion with the reality. There is, again, a very large share in Lebanon, particularly in relation to the resident population, 1/3 of the country represented today by refugees. So certainly a very important situation. And look at the Jordan, similar situation, and this is the situation in Europe. So when we are talking about public health intervention, when we're talking about concern of addressing public health implications, probably we're supposed to have a more broader view and approach if we want to make sure that we are really supporting the health of the most vulnerable and protecting the health of the population at the point of arrival. The situation remains in our region particularly active, and the geographic limitation is just euphemistic because in reality the migratory routes are always there. Usually the main engine, the main driving force for migration and for movement are basically socioeconomic development reasons. Those movements, of course, get triggers, get activated, amplified in the case of a crisis, man-made crisis, or war, or natural disaster. And you can see in these slides what are the pathways. Interestingly is that the more crowded pathway across the central Mediterranean between Tunisia, Libya, and Italy is today the deadliest migratory route in the world. But this is not able to stop the movement of people looking for a better situation.
The line on the right side to Russia is in fact a new open route for many migrants, which they are walking up to the north and then entering from Russia to Europe through Norway. And you can see on a smaller scale, but larger view of the situation in Africa. This is a constant process of moving, which requires really a convinced, pragmatic, and serious interaction and collaboration between country of origin, transit, destination. Otherwise, even the public health implications are very difficult to be addressed. Just few concepts before to go a bit in detail to give you an idea of what are those public health implications, what we are doing as a WHO, what we are looking for. Certainly, it is clear, even in the countries where the phenomenon is manifested tendency at the moment, that we need to get ready to deal with a long-term perspective. Even the Syrian situation, if you imagine the Syrian war started in 2011, it's already 7 years of crisis, and the estimate of UNHCR are that usually Syrian refugees are expected to be out of their country for the next 15, 20 years. So government better to have a plan in place, because this situation will not tend to change for a long term. And the necessity to address at the same time, so not to label the situation like a crisis, like a phenomenal situation, but certainly we need to address immediate needs as long-term needs. And what is more important from the public health point of view, that we cannot separate public health of migrants and refugees from the public health of the rest of the population. Is against the basic concept of public health, because with public health we tend to dislike pouch of population underserved or unserved by public health services, but also there are issues as a universal principle rights that need to be put in place. When we are going to countries, I told you, coming from a mission to Libya, what are the Ministry of Health concerns usually placed? And this is not only Libya, but this happens also in rich countries when you're discussing the Ministry of Health in countries which are traditionally resilient. And I'm sure those issues are also issue of debate in Canada. I was also involved into this kind of discussion in your country. So a major concern about the capacity of the health system of the receiving country. The main concern of politicians is the health system able to manage this situation? What is the economic impact? What I'm going to tell to my voters, to my public opinion? And then there is an issue, really technical issues, related to the access to service, really to overcome barriers which are not specific of migrants, but are present for the entire population. Just to give you an example, I guess anybody of you at home when had the need to contact or consult a doctor to undergo for a medical examination, the type of discussion most common at family is that, okay, who do we know? Which place perform better? So the navigation into the system is, for example, the first barrier. Imagine when you have people of different language, different culture, or they don't know or they don't have rights to access the system of the country where they live. Then a major concern of the public health sector is, okay, all these population demographic change, how is it going to impact in terms of prevalence or epidemiology in our country? Do we going to have an increase of communicable diseases or chronic diseases? Or do we going to have reappearing neglected or rare type of diseases? Because all these people coming from very faraway places with many public health issues of poverty and many issues. The element of integration is not less relevant for the health sector, although there are other sectors involved in trying to promote that. Imagine that one of the strongest indicators of integration of migrant refugees in the society is the access to immunization services. So the element of integration is directly linked to access to services and right to health. The necessity to share the information, to share the truth, to bust for false myths is also a major priority nowadays, because the fairy tales or ungrounded or not based on evidence stories about migrants, refugees, and public health risks associated with people coming from far away are very anecdotal, and the discourse is very negative, which is not really supported by the evidence in our hands. Although there is a public health but, which we know very well how to deal with, and we know very well what is it. And let me be a little bit more precise. In reality, although the situation is on top of the agenda of most of the countries around the world, still there is a quite concerning, from the public health point of view I'm talking, there is a quite concerning level of unpreparation or unclarity of action because of a list of pull and push factors, mainly triggered by political context, media issues, or also issue of knowledge and capacity in some of the countries around the world. Just to give you an example, this is a study conducted by my department, by my team, in relation to immunization. I told you it's a basic service, it's a key, it's essential public health intervention. Well, if we look to the European region, well known to be a region rich and capable in many aspects, well, you can see that by the color in the map on the side, that country in green, they have a national immunization program. But this is not clear and actually not include in many cases migrants and refugees. Then there is a small group of countries, those in violet, where the national immunization program does include, but in a very heterogeneous and unequal type of modality, creating disparity and creating inequity between countries, or also certain cases within the same country. And then, unfortunately, we have a large number of countries where basically we don't have any communication. And if you think that Russia or former Soviet Union is today the country which share probably the largest number of labor migrants, I hear that many of you are occupational health experts, so that would be your area of action, because we're talking about 15 million of labor migrants living in Russia nowadays. Well, that's quite concerning. Communicable diseases. Who of you have never come across a newspaper talking about risk of importing Ebola because of migrants coming to Canada, or that during the Ebola outbreak, or the appearing of communicable diseases because of migrants coming from poor countries and so on? Well, the situation, it's a bit complicated. In reality, from the general point of view, people movement, yes, is linked to possibility of sharing communicable diseases. For this, we have developed the international regulation and revised that in 2005. But this is why you have medical posts or check posts in the airports and in the ports, because by definition, movement can be a vector, can be a facilitation for virus and bacteria to cross borders. But it's not true that the direction of movement is one way, from south towards north. Actually, we have evidence that measles in many cases move from north towards south. Like that, also other situations. We have evidence that the situation of social exclusion and marginalization of many migrants and refugees in rich countries is prone to get infected of HIV and bring it back home. One day, those people will go eventually back home. So the difference of prevalence of public health profile and prevalence of disease between countries is certainly breached by the migration phenomenon, but the direction of movement is not unilateral from south to north. Actually, in the northern side of our member states, usually we are having available much more efficient health system, which they are able to deal with management of communicable diseases and without any risk in exploding into an outbreak or an epidemic. situation which is not the case, unfortunately, in some of the southern part of the world. What does it mean from the overall approach? What we are recommending when we're discussing with the Ministry of Health? What is the approach we are requesting? Well, certainly we are discouraging mandatory type of screening for all migrants unless there is a risk assessment or risk analysis supporting the need of a systematic screening. So to, by definition, by principle, apply a mandatory screening simply because those people are coming from another country doesn't make any sense. Just to, again, I'm insisting with the example of Ebola. The only case arrived in North America were from North America, which they traveled to the place of the immunization, not from migrants, although there was a lot of fear at that, in that concern. Overall, despite there is we are observing certainly appearing and cases of communicable disease brought by the movement of people, so including migrants and refugees, but overall the pressure, the threats represented by migrant refugees not bigger than the threat that a regular movement can pose. Just to give you an idea, I show you before a slide with Syrian refugees moving towards Europe. We are talking about less than 1 million people arrived to Europe in 2015. If you take any average airport in any capital of European countries, we are talking about 20, 30, 40 million people passing by this airport per year. So this to give you a dimension of the public health risk, the numerical risk related to the population movement, which is much lower in the case of 1 million refugees and migrants, although we are observing certain cases. Just to give you a practical example, this is a report which we get sometimes to go from Serbia during the walkway from Turkey, from Greece towards Northern Europe. Basically, you can see in the red box that injury, respiratory infection, upper respiratory infection were main case of disease or requesting healthcare support. Although we have hepatitis, TB, HIV, we see everything, but in terms of size, in terms of public health concern, certainly it's absolutely manageable and not justifying scaring the community or media campaign against migrants because spreading diseases. Let's look at the issue of TB, because usually this is a very interesting, very attractive issue for media and for public opinion, also for the stigma associated with this disease. If you're looking to the overall picture, still we are having a quite important concern in relation to this disease. More than 10 million new cases are detected every year, with a quite important mortality, 1.4 every year. In our region, we are having about 323,000 new cases every year, out of which 32 are dying, unfortunately, with a prerogative in our region where we are having the infection actually fast raising in the eastern part of our region, the former Soviet Union, mainly because of a disrupted health system and a not efficient target of the population and prevention of TB. But overall, I would like to attract your attention to look at both graphics on the left and right side of the slide, where you see this green line. In both cases, globally and in our region, we are talking about a decrease of disease. Basically, we're talking about major decreasing and reducing prevalence in many of the countries of around the world, with a concentration of cases in poorest countries. From the practical point of view, when we go to cross those informations with epidemiological data we are having from migrants, what we discover? Well, if you look to low prevalence countries like Italy, UK, Germany, where basically we are talking about between 6, 7 new cases per 100,000 inhabitants per year, so really low prevalence with a trend in decreasing, we're going to discover that between 30 to 50% of the new cases are represented by migrants or refugees, so people not born in the country of residence. But again, these new cases, this high number of positive cases among foreign population, are not able to invert the trend of overall incidence in the country. So what does it mean? If you look on the right, the graphic with the green bars and the black line, you can see that the tendency of the resident population positive cases was decreasing, while the tendency of better screening for people which are obviously not properly screened in the country of origin determine a higher identification of cases among migrant refugees, but overall, this doesn't change the overall epidemiology in the country. It doesn't infect the resident population, it doesn't invert the trend. So if you ask to me, and many of you are professors of global health and public health, well, when we are talking about shared responsibility here, what we're talking about in fighting TB, basically all well-developed countries with capacity could take a little share in combating this important disease, because usually affecting mainly most vulnerable and poor people among us. I'm just going fast because those are more detailed about the situation, but just nothing different from what I told you before, just example. Let's look at HIV. Overall, the situation is similar to the one of TB. Decreasing of incidence globally, but with difference according to different regions. In our region, Europe, again, STB, the eastern part of the region, unfortunately, has this prerogative to have the fastest growing of epidemic of HIV, mainly among heterosexual. And when we're going to interface those data with migration data, here you have already a disaggregation by nationality, and you can see that again the HIV also tend to be higher. That's interesting in a study we have conducted in those migrants or refugees coming from high prevalence countries. So like the element of behavior and living conditions at home, if not tackled at the country of arrival, will determine the infection and exposure to the virus also at the country of destination. Then a study conducted by the European CDC actually came up with quite worrisome picture because the epidemiological information showed that unfortunately, serious level of segregation and isolation and inequity which many migrants and refugees are facing in Western Europe. You know, which country can be pretty cruel if you don't have a job, if you don't have the papers, you can be kind of ghost in your society with almost impossibility to access basic services, including health. So this study has been proving that the infection actually occurs at the destination country because of the poor living condition. And we observe this situation in Western Europe. We observe this situation also in Russia with labor migrants coming from Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and other country in not in a good economic shape in our region. The denial, the limited access to early diagnosis and treatment is certainly the main fuel for continuing the contagion, continuing the spreading of the disease among this group of population. Usually there is a kind of invisible barrier existing between migrants and refugees because of their own living apart in many cases where they are particularly disadvantaged, which is making the situation even more concerning. And the association in the most extreme situation of poverty, the association with multi-drug resistance TB and HIV, it's an issue of major concern that is manifesting in Western countries, despite some of the migrants and refugees can come from high prevalence country in the world. Chronic diseases. The situation with chronic diseases is also quite concerning. We are giving a lot of attention, mainly because it's underestimated. the acute phase of migration, the public health concern tend to be easily focused on communicable diseases, even if the evidence doesn't prove the contrary or doesn't support that concern, while we are tending to interrupt access to treatment for chronic patients because of the acute phases of the migratory process. Then the extreme difficult migratory process migrant refugees they are confronting, of course, it's a major limitation of access to treatment. But also at the arrival, at the destination, especially when we're talking about country of transit, where the permanence is temporary, the attention to chronic disease is quite limited. In fact, this survey done in Turkey, where I told you we had about 3.4 million refugees at the moment hosted by the country, in a wonderful management situation. Turkey has won the award for the best refugees camp ever put in place by a country. But and also the camps are open camps, so refugees are free to move in and out. In fact, today in Turkey, 90% of the refugees population lives in an urban setting within the society, not in refugees camps. Well, still, the survey conducted by us in the country shows that about 1/3 of the male and female population in need of anti-hypertensive treatment is actually neglected, or only 7% of female population in need of a screening for cervical cancer is actually have access to this kind of preventive screening. Mental health, there is a lot of story, a lot of talking about mental health dimension. In many cases, in a bit too amplified situation. In many cases, there is a perception of a need, but no evidence on what is the reality and not clear clarity of what needs to be done, particularly in the acute phases of the migratory process. These studies we are conducting, the observation we are conducting, is quite interesting. When we're going to look at the traditional psycho disorders, as schizophrenia or other schizoaffective disorders, the incidence is not really different from the compared resident population. Of course, the element of post-traumatic disorders, which this population, refugees population, undergoes through violent experiences or witnesses violent experiences. So at the end of the day, the concern for mental disorder is almost an issue of humanitarian support. It's not a public health concern or a public health of a concern of public health spending when we're going to see these numbers and this picture. Anyhow, overall, we are talking about several-fold higher in the refugees and migrant population and children refugees, the incidence of post-traumatic disorder compared with the resident population. I'm going towards concluding, although we also observe a quite interesting phenomenon in refugees and migrants. We all know, and even if the evidence is not so strong, the healthy migrant effect story, but in reality it's true that there is a kind of natural selection among this population. And again, what we are calling them this adaptive growth that many of the children or refugees, young refugees and migrants are experiencing. Really a very strong capacity of adaptation and going back to a normal life, which is making even more encouraging the work that all of you and all of us we are doing in supporting this people. I'm concluding by saying that chronic diseases is very important that we are filling the gap of interruption of treatment, access to treatment during and post the migratory process. Mental health issues need particular attention. In many cases, we are talking about helping people, We are not talking about providing expensive access to care. We're talking about assisting human beings to overcome a drama that anybody of us will react at the same if exposed to the same situation. And then the necessity to really address this issue in an intersectorial manner. You know better than me that in many cases, unfortunately, the health sector is arriving as a last, who is mostly exposed or capable to detect or to intervene or to determine the type of services available in the Ministry of Labour, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who are managing the overall migration policy. So it's important that a very efficient and close collaboration is present at the policy level, at the planning level from all sectors, not only when the problem arises and interventions are requested. As a WHO, what we do, we decided to intervene in a very pragmatic manner, really going straight away to the public health dimension, really providing robust technical assistance to member states. As I said before, it's everyday reality to confront with the Ministry of Health, which they don't have enough understanding, they don't have enough capacity, they don't know how to address things, they have enough resources to deal with the situation. Just these days back during the mission in Libya, those were the typical concern of the Ministry of Health there. But interestingly is that the Ministry of Health understood the need to set up into the ministry a unit for migration health in order to be able to understand, digest, and maneuver the technical issues, public health issues related to that. Evidence is my mantra. We cannot plan action if we don't have a solid, robust evidence supporting our decision and our actions and our policies. In many cases, our evidence is fragile, not because we don't have data, but because we don't have comparative data. We don't have single set of data to offer to policymakers in many cases. And we don't have operational research in place in many cases. Or the research is very much fragmented, focusing on micro-reality rather than too extensive or multi-country situation. Advocacy and communication means not only to talk to the public, the right thing, busting false myths, but also talking to our people. Not really, we are confronting that the main obstacle to the right action in public health in case of migration and refugees critical movement is represented by healthcare workers, which they are going in a very stereotype or in a very or in an appropriate way addressing public health issues. Last but not least, all we do, if it's not supported by a very smart policy, but it's not in the shelf, the policy needs to be implemented, needs to be endorsed, then we don't go that far away. For this in our region, we are the first WHO region out of 6 which convinced member states, even with a very difficult situation from each other, even hostile to having a foreign policy hostile to migrants and refugees, but while addressing solid public health argument, no one withdraw from engaging into doing the right thing. So our region loaded himself for the first time of a strategy, an action plan for the next 6 years. This year is just the second year of implementation, and we have conducted the first monitoring survey, and 50% of the country are compliant with the activity and the objective put in place by the action plan, which is articulated around 9 strategic priority areas, which you see here listed in the slides. We have done a little bit more. We really went down to spelling out what are the actions expected by member states, so in a kind of minimum package of action, and what are the actions that WHO as a secretariat, as a health specialized agency will do in support of its member states. And the work done in our region is actually a major element of sharing of know-how within WHO and outside the WHO with partners, because we have a prerogative. I like to underline this issue when we are doing our job that will show us in the area of migration health, we need to stress that we are not dealing with migration. I don't know anything personally about migration, although I'm dealing with migration health. Dealing with this area of work since a number of years in my region. But what I know very well is the public health implication of migration. So what we do is to address the public health aspects, and nobody as WHO is in the best position to do that in support of member states or partner organizations. So to continue this direction is also important to invest into knowledge sharing, to bridge up with the academia, with key stakeholders. For this reason, we set up the first knowledge hub on migration health in our region, and now we are just operating to make it to become global with the involvement of the headquarters, where we focusing on very precise intervention summits, so very political type of gathering with a Ministry of Health representation, policy dialogue, which are a little bit kind of, just to give an example, BBC Art Talks type of actions, where you put the key stakeholders of a single country or a multiple number of countries into a room with a locked door, and you put the elephant on the table. You shake the tree in order to start the process of reform and start the process of upgrading the migration health solution. Summer school, this year in September, we are having the second summer school dedicated to know-how sharing and also bringing policymakers from member states, and usually we are hosting member states decision maker, policy maker, and then PhD researcher, young researcher, and journalists, because we want to tackle also this part of the society having a very important role in promoting better understanding of the issue. And beside the theoretical, the frontal type of teaching with the best teacher usually invited to, or people of huge experience invited to share their own experience, we are also offering to the participant the possibility to touch by hand the reality by engaging them in simulation with the Navy last year in Italy, or really going to the ground to see what's going on and to see what does it mean to today manage the migration, refugees health for some of the member states. Then it is routine business webinars. We are having, my team is funding on a regular basis by inviting top experts in different topics, really 1 hour and a half, very focused type of discussion with the possibility of the public to actively engage in the discussion. And then last but not least, we have a quite important production of standard operating procedures, technical guidance, policy briefs, reports, guidelines, so a lot of material which we are hoping that public, because everything is available on the website for free, public can use and make it functioning for their own needs. Here just the example of the webinars and the Knowledge Hub description, but I'm going fast because I finished my time. And this is the last summer school, some slides of the simulation that the participants, the students attended with the Navy to see what the public health intervention actually started at sea during the search and rescue operation at sea. I'm concluding with the last global tip. All this going on in each region, all this going on in Canada, what you're doing and so on, I want you to know that it's somehow linked to a very unique time for migration health, refugees health work. General for refugees and migrant issues, because since 2016, the world realized that there was a gap in one side to really upgrade and update the approach to refugee, the management of the refugee, the needs of the refugees, and in the other side, the need to better understand how to manage and to secure orderly and regular management of migration movements. In fact, in 2016, there was an adoption of a paper, the New York Declaration, which today is the inspiring document for the development of two compacts, the Compact of Refugee and the Compact on Migrants. Those compacts are at the moment under negotiation with member states. This morning, in fact, we had the fourth round of negotiation here in Geneva on the compact of refugees, while the compact on migration is usually negotiated in New York by member states, as in Geneva, and the target is to release those papers by September. For us, why this job is important? Because those papers will represent the policy framework for the next 20 years in this business. Not only for us, but also for member states. So for us, it's a major responsibility to make sure that the public health dimension is properly represented. And with the compact of refugees, we are quite happy how things are going. We are a little bit more suffering with the compact on migrants because the health, in many cases, by member states is perceived as a cost rather than investment. And the attention in the case of migration, it's tend to easily divert towards security and economic element rather than social protection. From the WHO specific point of view, last year we managed to have a resolution and a global framework adopted by the World Health Assembly. This means that all Ministry of Health, including Canadian Ministry of Health, has a framework which need to be implemented. In fact, this year we are presenting next week at the World Health Assembly, which will start on the 20th of May here in Geneva, the situation analysis for each region, so including for the Americas, which will be the direct source of information for the global action plan that we already started to put together and will be presented to the member states for adoption next World Health Assembly 2019 in alignment with the Global Compact of Refugees and Migration. So to make long story short, we are having a quite major and intensive and resource-intensive type of work ongoing at the political level and the technical level, the highest technical level with member states to make sure that the public health dimension is updated by member states into documents which will support then the action at country level. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm sorry if I took few minutes more, and again apologizing for not being there with you today. Thank you.